Good. Good. Now talk to
Well, I want to
David the other day, make sure we had the fire suppression system.
Nice to have a large crowd here to participate in our discussion this evening. I want to thank you for your time, because certainly what we're doing is making an investment in the future of our school division. And what we're doing right now with our students is making an investment in the future. And we know that great communities come from great schools. And I appreciate you giving me time tonight to participate in this discussion. To give you a little history, we've been working on this as an organization for about a year. We got a group of stakeholders together last year, and we had some discussions. Many of those folks are in this room tonight. And so that group of teachers, parents, citizens, and we studied the whole issue associated with what we're going to do to alleviate the overcrowded conditions at Sandy Hook and W.W. Robinson. It was a great discussion. It was a lot of work. But at the end of that conversation, we realized this is a very complex issue, and truly there is no one solution that rises to the top as being the answer. And we also recognize the fact that we need to do something and do something now. So that discussion took place last year, and in the spring of the year, the school board decided to commission an evaluation of our facilities, and that process began, and we signed the contract, and on July 1st, we began working with the architectural firm HBA, which is an architectural and design firm out of Virginia Beach, but working with support also by the Young Richter, which is an educational facility planning team out of Ohio. So since July, that work's been going on, and we've been working through that process. To date, we've had 2 separate meetings with community stakeholders. Your facilitators for this evening were integral parts of that. So we've already had a lot of work going on as a community, and our goal for tonight is to be able to have you hear about the work that's been going on and provide us with your feedback in written form regarding the options we're going to present to you this evening. This is not an open mic night. This is not stand and ask questions. It's an opportunity to have dialogue in your small groups. You will have an opportunity to give feedback in public meetings with the school board as this goes on. But tonight's more written dialogue, it's more conversation at your table, and it's more fact gathering, getting all the information that you need to be well informed and well educated about this process. Mike, could you go to the next slide? It's important that we have our conversation tonight in context about what's important to us as an organization. And last year, we had groups of folks get together and talk about our core non-negotiable beliefs as an organization. And these are the beliefs that drive us. These are the things that we truly believe in as an organization. And then you see at the very top, all of our decisions will be based in the best interest of our kids. That's why we're here. That's what education is. We're a public school division that teaches kids. And everything that we do is driven by that core belief. We also know that the work that we do as an organization is making an investment in our future. Students that walk through our doors every day are our future doctors, lawyers, community leaders. It's important that we do the best job we can to prepare them for that ultimate future. Thank you for this slide. Go back. There we go. Perfect. An important context, too, is that this past summer, as the school board does every year, they approve their school division goals. And it's important to know that these are not just school board goals. These are our goals as a school division. And education is changing and changing rapidly. So as we make decisions regarding how we're going to alleviate the overcrowding on a short-term basis, these goals and these beliefs that we just discussed are going to drive those decisions. Because we're educating students for a future that we just don't know about what it's going to be like as we progress. We're preparing them for jobs that don't yet exist and solving problems that don't yet exist either. And so we need to provide students with the skills they need to be global ready. So our decisions are instructionally driven, making the decisions in the best interest of kids. And so with regard to system efficiencies and how we're using our facilities, that's why we're here this evening. To explore options and have dialogue and get your feedback in written form regarding those options. So, that's our chart in front of us this evening. I apologize for the warmth in here. We had it cooled down and ready to go. We had a lightning strike. And so we scrambled to try to get the air conditioning up and running. And it's running, but it got warm. Now we're trying to cool it down. So hopefully it won't be too uncomfortable in here. I'm going to turn tonight's presentation over to our facilitators and the folks who have worked hard since July 1st to get us to this point. I want to introduce to you Mr. Mike Ross, who is principal with the architect and design firm HBA. And I want to introduce you to Tracy Ricker, who is CEO of the educational planning firm The Young Ricker. And so I'll turn it over to them. They want to give us some information regarding our office.
Well, I'm going to start. So I'm going to start up here. If you can't hear me because my mic keeps dropping, because I tend to do that sometimes, just raise your hand back there. You guys okay back there? Okay. My name's Tracy Ricker. I'm an educational facility planner. My firm works kind of nationally with a lot of divisions and districts across the country of all sizes to help divisions and districts get through things like this planning efforts. It's not all about capital planning. There's demographic planning. There's capacity planning. There's all those kind of things that go into everything is kind of non-architectural. Michael introduced himself too, but this team has worked together almost 10 years now. Mike and I have known each other, working on solutions throughout Virginia. Even though we work nationally, we've probably worked in, Mike and I have worked in probably 5 Virginia districts together, and I work in about 18 forward. So I'm familiar. My background is I'm actually a teacher. I was a middle grades teacher for several years. So big crowds don't scare me much anymore, because 7th grade pretty much took care of that. But it's been 15 years since I've been in that classroom. So I'm not sure I can walk in and teach as effectively as I could. Much like Dr. Riley just talked about, things have changed tremendously. And so what we're going to try to take you through tonight is an exercise of background information, trying to get educated as much as we can on the same data set. I'll talk a little bit about enrollment. Mike will talk about capacity, and then we're going to go through those options that we presented. I'm going to tell you right up front, you're going to be inundated with a lot of information tonight. And for that, I'm going to apologize right up front. With that being said, we're not going to ask that you have an individual questionnaire in front of you. You don't have to finish that tonight. It's going to be online tomorrow morning. It goes live. You go to the division website. It's going to be online for you. Because you may not want to answer tonight. And frankly, I couldn't blame you, because you're going to see a lot of stuff tonight. But it's our charge to make sure that we get that information to you. In return, the charge is that we have to report back to the division kind of the response that we get from this meeting. And so you see the meeting is set up a little differently. We will answer questions individually when we finish up the presentation. Otherwise, we're going to be here for, 6 or 7 hours. And, it's a pretty night out there. There's a fair going on, so you got kids at home. So what we typically do is we'll give you a presentation here. And then if you have a question, just jot it down. And after the presentation, we're going to come and talk to you individually about that. And we think that's important. But the reason we do that is because we feel like you need to write down your response for us. Providing the board, all the boards in the county, named down the list, a document that's listed with comments, we feel is an effective tool for communication. Not everybody's here tonight in the community. We're not going to hear every comment we make, and we want the community to see all the comments that come in. So that's the reason we do it this way. And our job is to collect data. And so if you have those questions, because you will have some questions, but we feel like we can take the time individually with you to answer those questions. So Mike, you want to introduce yourself before I get kind of jumping in on the charge of this, and then
okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Ross with HBA Architecture. We're a firm that specializes in school design. We're from Virginia Beach, but we work all over the state. I've been designing schools for about 15 years now. I'm also an education planner. And as Tracy mentioned, we've been doing this together for a while, and so we love the challenge.
And we do. And this is a challenge, no question. We're going to show you data tonight that many of you are surprised with. Our charge is to come up with a short-term solution to the overcrowding in the elementary grade. Now, I may caution you that you're going to want to jump into what can we do long-term, or what's this going to do. In that light, be careful there, because we need to fix something pretty quickly. But we can't get ourselves in a situation where we can't get out of a situation like, building modulars that were supposed to be temporary that ends up growing roots into the ground. And so we need to think about that, and this is what I'm going to ask you to do tonight. I'm from Indiana originally. I played basketball all my life. I coached basketball for the rite of passage. When you coach basketball, you understand that you have to rotate out of plays. But if a play doesn't work, you rotate out of it. Does that make sense? Same thing here. That decisions that we make right now need to have an effective way to rotate out. Because things will change. Demographics will change, conditions will change, all those things will change. And so we don't lock ourselves into something that's not so flexible that we can't go and move on. And so you're going to see 6 options tonight, or 7 options, I'm sorry, that hopefully provide some flexibility, but understanding that we need to make them effective almost immediately, and then concentrate on how long that effectiveness will last. So Mike and his team walked every single facility, measured every classroom, went in every room in the buildings, to make sure that we had a good reflection of what the facilities are like. Room sizes, how many kids are in there, all those kind of things. And so we've got a good understanding of what the facilities are like, how many rooms are in there, how they're being used. We've sat down with each principal and staff to make sure that we have reported everything accurately as we can. Our role at first was to do the demographic work. So I'm going to take you through kind of some of the demographics of the division to show you kind of where the enrollment is going to go as we see best with data that we have. So when we do enrollment projections, we do what is basically called a cohort survival. So we look at historical enrollment, we look at live birth data, we look at housing permit information, to try to determine how many kids we're going to get in the future. I'm going to tell you right out front that enrollment projections are an art and science. There's only so much you can do with the data that you have. But I can't control things that are out of our control. And there's, between weather, between industry moving in that we haven't identified yet, between those rumors of housing startups and all that, if we got permit information we can count on. But what we saw, one of the most influential things that we see not only here but across the country is the live birth data. And you can see that as it declined in the beginning of the century, when the economy was good, people had money in their pocket, everybody could afford children, right? And so you went up in 2006 and 2007, kind of at the height of our economy, and then all of a sudden, 2008 happens. And this country kind of comes to a standstill. And people start to get worried. Much like in the beginning of the century, remember Y2K? Nobody had kids in 1999 because we didn't have enough binary digits in our computers and we thought we'd come to an end. So birth rates plummeted. Same thing we saw here, but what you're going to see, especially in a stable community that you live in, is that when birth rates go down, if you look 5 years later, what happens to the kindergarten class? It goes down. That's a cohort survival. How many kids get born, how many kids show up? And so you see that we're going to see some trends that happen based in, and you'll see it historically and then in the projected enrollment. That's just one piece of the information. Another piece that we do, go ahead Mike, is this, we use geographic information systems mapping to look at data sets that allow us to kind of drill into what we call block groups and trying to see where we see growth and decline according to census data that's been projected out. I'll give you an idea. We get this from Esri, which is kind of the Microsoft of geographic information system. This is the same software that's used by CVS and Walmart's out there to try to determine customer bases. And so we look at student enrollment, which makes sense for us, right? We see the dark reds are areas that we anticipate percentage growth, and then those lighter colors, and you can't quite see it on here because of the colors here, but there's some blues in there that we see some decline. You can look in there, you see your neighborhood, you know your county, you know your cities and towns. So we use this a little bit to make the adjustments to those survival ratios when we see that there's spikes based on some of that. Again, only to make our projections a little more accurate. So, in that being said, we go to the historical enrollment, and if you look at the historical enrollment, I'm going to kind of stand in the back a little bit so you can look at the chart. But you see that in the last 5 years, you guys haven't moved anywhere, enrollment-wise. Which is, look, 5 years ago, 6201 to 6195. That's 6 students difference in 5 years. Folks, that's as stable as I've seen anybody out there. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the pre-K 5, 6, 8, 9, 12, the last 5 years has seen a 100 student increase at the elementary grade level and the decline at the high school level. Which makes sense, again, if I think back to those birth rates and what was going on. So if I look historically at that and I say, my projection, and then we actually color code, you see the greens and the reds. Reds tend to be those bubbles of enrollment, those high marks of enrollment, and you see those kind of move through. And the greens are kind of those lighter enrollments, but as they get darker green, they're starting to get heavier. So we color code it so you don't really have to focus on numbers so much, but you start to see bubbles. Now, if you look at the projection then for the division, which is the next one, if you look at that, you're going to see that those greens are moving out, and you see some of those darker greens, and you see those darker reds in the projection. Now, here's again, just an interesting statistic. If you look at the pre-K 5 at the bottom, I've got the actual enrollment from last year. We obviously don't have enrollment from this year yet. It starts next week and we'll start counting. But we're going to see kind of this increase in the next couple of years, but we're going to kind of flatline back. But here's the thing, is we're not flatlining back to less. And so the solution of trying to get through this bubble only means that in 3 to 5 years, you're going to be in the same spot you are today. And it's my guess you don't want to hire another consultant to come back in 3 years to make the same discussion. And so part of that is that we need to look at that and say, okay, where's that enrollment going to be? And again, we see it pretty stable. We don't see any big fluctuations there. But we've advised the division that this is an exercise you should go through at least every other year, just in case something kind of weird happens in the division. And so you're always keeping up to that enrollment. So I just took 5 minutes to tell you that you're going to be the exact same size you were in 5 years. Because all the data shows that we're not seeing a lot. Now, what we did was we went to each of the feeder patterns. So we geocoded, which means we took every student address and we matched it on a map. And we ran a projection based on where kids live, not where they attend. Because remember, we have kids that jump boundaries. We have kids that attend the elementary schools, not in their boundary. We have high school kids across boundaries. Whether for programs, special education, their mom or dad works at the school and they go with them until they cross over. But if we do the projection and you look into the Strasburg High feeder pattern, you can see that Sandy Hook Elementary is on there. You can see those enrollment trends out there. But you can see in the projected enrollment that we're going to grow a little bit more over the next couple of years there, but then it's just going to level back out. And that's all the trends that we see there. Now, if that's the case, then again, if you look 5 years out, which I think is the best determinant, I don't want to go 10 years out because who knows in 10 years. But in 5 years, we're in the same spot we were. Okay, even though you see that bubbles kind of move through, we're going to just be right back. And again, go across the board, and you can see it's a pretty stable enrollment overall. Now, if I go to which one's next? I go to the Central High Feeder and W.W. Robinson. Now, here's an interesting one where you see in the next couple of years, we're projecting almost 30 more kids. Well, that's a classroom and a half, if you think about that. And if you've been in the school, do they have a classroom and a half they can give up right now? And I'm hearing no, but I haven't seen kids in there, but I'm hearing no. And that's what the principals are telling me, staff is telling me, that's what we're hearing. And so that enrollment, when Mike shows you the capacity, you're going to see that it doesn't align to the capacity of the building. One of the first units of measure we should always do is see how many kids live in a boundary, and then what's the capacity of that building. Because the first rule of anything is that every kid deserves a seat in their neighborhood school, regardless of where they go. So I would never, ever build a school for 500 when I know I have 900 kids in a boundary. Just the same, I would never build a school for 900 with 500 kids in a boundary. And so we have to balance that over time. And divisions do this all the time. They change boundaries, they do student assignments, they build programs, they do all kinds of things to adjust to this. And those are part of the options you see. Last one then is into the Seminole Jackson feeder. And again, very stable enrollment here. And again, this is a smaller population, but it's a less populated boundary. And so it's just a smaller population down here. And smaller schools have their challenges too. And we understand that. And so how do we do that and look at that within all this? So again, that kind of gets you through the enrollment. Pretty stable everywhere. Going to bump up a little bit in the next couple of years, but right back to where we were.
Okay, I get to talk about something controversial issue, capacity. I wish capacity was as simple as counting the number of classrooms and multiplying and multiplying instead of complicated than that. There's 3 different issues that we look at when we're analyzing the capacity of school. We look at the teaching spaces available, not only what type they are, but what size they are. we look at the education program. The education program is different. The kindergarten is for first and third grade, and it is for fourth and fifth grade. It's different in middle school, and it's different in high school. And the way that different grade groups use it is different. As you go through the system, elementary school kids, they're in their primary classroom for most of the day. I think they go to art, once every 2 weeks. So they're not in the classroom. Same thing for music. We're talking built-in slight inefficiency in the elementary school model, but that's much again because we don't want to.
We need to speak up a little bit. Can't hear back here, please.
Moving kids into those classrooms when the elementary school kids go to art music. Same thing with middle school. Middle school kids, they tend to work in teams to facilitate interdisciplinary learning. So you've got your language arts, math, science, social studies team. They tend to move around the building in groups. They're all taking their 4 subjects at the same time. They all do their exploratory courses at the same time. That facilitates a different way of looking at how we look at different things. When they're not in the classroom, the way you're currently operating in middle school, when you go to their exploratory, nobody's using those classrooms. Those classrooms are used for 2 periods a day, so there's a built-in inefficiency to that. Community choice, I'll talk about some of the options that we're choosing as a community, which also impact the capacity. I'm going to start with using Sandy Hook as an example. I've talked about teaching spaces available. All the blue, the yellow, and the purple, those are teaching spaces. So a lot of this building is dedicated to teaching spaces. But one of the neat things about Sandy Hook is that we've got a set of modular things on our side. Okay, those are portable classrooms that became permanent. And they're about 2/3 the size of a regular classroom. So we're on the right course to give those capacity. So in our capacity analysis, we assign them 18 versus 20, or 18 students versus 22. Talk about the education program delivery model. Community choices. As a community, we choose to reduce your teacher-pupil ratio for kindergarten through 3rd grade because it's a great idea, because it promotes literacy learning, because it creates a better relationship between teachers and students, more one-to-one. So when you choose to reduce your teacher-pupil ratio, we have to count less kids per classroom, so it's not 44 anymore, it's a smaller number. One of the choices you make as a community is you do full-day kindergarten. It's great that you do that, but not every county or city in Virginia does full-day kindergarten. We're from Virginia Beach, we do have to do kindergarten. So having kindergarten full day for 200 or 180 plus students has an impact on capacity. You also, in Sandy Hook and Robinson in particular, you have made a choice, because you really didn't have a choice, to reduce your art and music offerings. In a school of this size, you would typically need 2 art rooms and 2 music rooms in order to provide the amount of instruction the state says you need to provide. Right now, I think students get 25 minutes every each day. So they're not getting the art instruction that they should be getting. That's a choice that you made because you need to fit students into these buildings. So you optimize the classroom spaces. Middle school. This is Signal Dobb Middle School. And what I was talking about with respect to teams and interdisciplinary learning is that the way this works, this is your 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So when the 6th grade goes to exploratory classrooms like family consumer science, or discovery, or art, they leave these classrooms. They leave them as a team. They leave them during their periods. So those classrooms are not being utilized at that time, so that impacts the capacity of the building. because we're not using every classroom every day. So one of the things we wanted to look at is how do the capacities that we've developed based on looking at the teaching stations available, looking at the educational programs, and looking at community choice, how do they compare with the capacities that were developed 9 or so years ago? And these are the numbers. So we got a slight decrease at Sandy Hook, 8 students, a slight increase at Robinson, a larger decrease at Ashby Dean, probably because there's a little bit more special education going on there. So overall, a pretty small, it was nominal decrease, 1.26% in the last 10 years. As Tracy was showing you about that population level and moving through your elementary schools, in the same time frame, your enrollments increased about 4%. So that's what's causing the pressure right now. So I mentioned the choice to reduce classroom sizes. And why would we do that when the state says you can put 24 students average in a classroom? Why would we use a smaller classroom average and calculate our capacities for the purpose of our analysis? Well, the reason is, and I already mentioned this, but I'll go through it again, parents, teachers, administrators, and school board generally believe that lowering the teacher-pupil ratios for K-3 education improves literacy learning. It increases the amount of time that teachers can spend with individualized instructions for each student. The state of Virginia also strongly believes that reducing class size is important enough that the General Assembly passed a statute 20-some years ago, which basically gives communities a financial incentive to reduce K-3 classroom size and teacher pupil ratios. So there's 2 reasons that it's important. This is a summary of the K-3 primary class size reduction program as presented by the Department of Education. And what it's based on is how many students in the school qualify for free or reduced lunch. And the way this chart works is if 30 to 45% of your students are approved for free or reduced lunch, and you can achieve this 19-to-1 teacher-pupil ratio, and you can achieve that maximum class size, then you can qualify for these financial incentives. Sandy Hook Elementary School and W.W. Robinson qualify for this because of the number of students that they have on free or reduced lunch. Ashby Lee Elementary School actually qualifies at the higher level at the 45% level. So their target maximum individual class size is 23, and their target teacher-to-pupil ratio is 18-to-1 versus 19-to-1. So what does that mean to a school when you're taking a look at averages versus maximums, and how does that relate to classroom capacity? And this is the amount of money that's coming from the state next year, $725,000, to support this class size reduction program. All right, so unfortunately, students don't arrive at our schools in neat packets of 24. Grade levels will fluctuate. You might have 96 students in one grade level. It works really great if your average class size is 24 students, so 4 classrooms. If you have 104 students, you're probably not going to go to a 5th classroom. You're going to squeeze another student into those classrooms. And same thing with 88 students. You're probably going to just have less students in those classrooms, because what you're working towards is the average per grade level. 24 students average. Now, when you change your criteria to maximum, the dynamic changes. The 96 students, 24 students in 4 classrooms, that still works. the 88 students, 22 students times 4 classrooms, that still works. But all of a sudden, if you've got a bubble of 104 students in a grade level, you can't put 26 students in 4 classrooms and satisfy that maximum class size requirement that allows you to take advantage of this reduced pre-K size reduction program. What you have to do is you have to go to a 5th classroom. And once you go to that 5th classroom, your students are thinned out, and you might only have 20 or 22 per class. So what this does, when you go from looking at your K3 as averages versus maximums, it reduces the overall capacity of the school, because when we're looking at maximums, we need to drop the average down to about 21 or 22. So when we did our capacity analysis for Sandy Hook, for Robinson, and also for SBD, we used that 22 number for capacities, because you want to take advantage of that reduced classroom size. Once again, that's the state payment that's being brought to Shenandoah from state taxes. And that payment actually covers the cost of the additional K-3 teachers needed to accommodate that reduced teacher-pupil ratio. So that's the reason for that. The state is incentivizing the county and actually paying for helping you hire the teachers to support that initiative. All right. So, middle school, a little bit different situation. What's going on there? We've lost 31% of our capacity in the last 10 years. Well, what's happened is middle school education, the way it's delivered, has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. When the capacity study was done back in '06, they classified your building as a junior high school. And what that means is every classroom, every group of students is moving around the building at the same time. So you're achieving probably 85 or 90% efficiency in your building. So I'm going to use an example of a high school. This is Central High. You see all the classrooms that are colored in blue or purple or dark blue or green. Those are all contributing to the capacity of the school, because we're counting all teaching spaces at between 21 and 30 students, and we're using an 85% utilization factor. That's the way we calculate high schools. That's the way we calculated junior high schools. When you change your educational program to a middle school model, it changes the way you calculate middle schools. Virginia understands this now, and 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, they started counting their middle schools differently also. Talked about how that impacts your schedule. You see the bells or the periods that are shaded yellow, those are the core subjects. The periods that are shaded green are the related arts, or I call it exploratory programs. But it's your art, it's your music, it's your physical education, it's your discovery programs. So what's happening here is that when, say, the 6th grade is doing their related arts, there's nobody in those classrooms. They left those classrooms are sitting empty. So there's a built-in inefficiency to that model. Same thing with the 7th grade. When the 7th grade leaves their core classrooms and takes the related arts, their core classrooms are empty. So we're going to talk about some ways to improve on that as we get into the options. So when we look at how we count capacity for middle school, you can see there's a lot less rooms being counted for capacity, because we're not counting exploratory classrooms, we're only counting core classrooms because of the way the model works with team integrated disciplinary learning. High school capacities, Similar to elementary school, they haven't changed a whole lot. Strasburg High School actually went up a little bit. Central High School down close to 100 students, primarily because there's more special ed and resource happening in the room, in the building now than it was 10 years ago. You also actually have a pre-K class from Robinson occupying part of the building. So that's taking away high school capacity. And we can move them back into the Robinson Central High School capacity and go up those 22, 25 students. So not a big decrease, pretty similar to what we were looking at, or what your other consultant was looking at 9 years ago. Okay, so back to our charge, looking at short-term solutions to solve the overcrowding at Sandy Hook and Robinson. And by short-term, it means we can't build a building, we can't build new classrooms. And it means it needs to be economical, and as Tracy mentioned, it needs to be something you can play out of. So with that, we're going to start talking about some of the options. And on your tables, you have an options packet that you can follow along with us. But the options that we're going to talk about tonight and ask you to consider and discuss and weigh in on are several different ways to change grade configurations. We're going to look at the impact of reducing pre-K and kindergarten offerings. We're going to look at the impact of increasing class sizes up to that 24 student average that I talked about, what that does. We're going to look at providing temporary modular classrooms. We're going to look at what happens if you change the elementary school and middle schools to a year-round calendar. There's some huge impact. And we're also going to look at what happens or what opportunities there are for changing attendance patterns. So with that, Tracy?
Okay, I'm going to jump into grade configuration first, because when you look at the surface, a simple move seems to be simple on the surface. So we've received emails that said, move the 5th grade back because that's where they used to be. And so, okay, let's look at 5th grade into the middle schools as you have them. So what we did here, and you can see it on your sheet, is that the first chart is the existing. The second chart shows us how the utilization percentage would be if you stayed in the current delivery model. So if you kept teams together, and not a junior high model where kids rotate classes every period, that this is the utilization. So, and then the last one actually shows if you move then the 8th grade into the high school and make it a 5-7. So a pre-K 4, 5-7, 9, 12. And it gives you a couple scenarios there. Now let me look at that first one. Then on the right-hand side, one of the first things that we did with the steering committee, with the community group, that we worked with a smaller community group, is we asked them as we went through these to list the benefits and challenges that they recognized in each of these options that are presented. Because they all have benefits and challenges. And at some level, everyone has a cost. And that cost will be determined based on what you do. Now, here's the other thing, is that as you go through these, we think it's important that you observe these as, can we do a couple of these together? Are there options that we can use one and use another in combination to achieve the goal we want to achieve? And so as we're going through these, I'd like you to think about it that way. Now, the other thing I'd like you to do is I'd like you to keep an objective, open mind about each of the options as we go through them. Because I know that people walk in these meetings, because I've done this a lot, with a set mindset that this is what we got to do. And all we're going to ask you to do is open your mind for an hour and say, give each one a fair opportunity to be discussed. And think about the benefits and challenges and how that fits your community. Mike and I will make a recommendation at the end, but the recommendation can't come from us. It has to come from a community as a whole. Because you live here, you have to live with it. So go through those benefits and challenges. As you talk in your groups, you're going to come up with more. And we'd like you to list those if you got it. But let's look at this first chart. The first chart, if you stay in the current middle grade delivery model, so kids staying in teams and moving as teams, go into exploratory where rooms stay empty. It fixes the problem at the elementary school because one of the underlying premises that you're going to see is the best way to alleviate utilization is to remove kids from campuses. Take kids off, you don't have the problem. You're going to see that when you see year-round schools. You're going to see that in different options here. But in the middle school model, all you've done is displace now the utilization issue. And every one of the middle schools then goes to 120 plus utilization. So you're 20% over the maximum capacity of those buildings staying in that model. Now, but that's just option A in this. I'm going to show you option B, which puts them in a junior high model. The second one is to go ahead then and look at moving the 8th grade into the high school. Now, once again, a personal decision you have to make as a community is what grades you're comfortable at in each grade level. There's communities out there that have 7, 12 high schools. There's communities out there that I'm never putting my 7th grader in high school. So it's a personal choice to grade configuration when it comes to your communities. But you see that if you put that grade configuration, once again, you shifted the utilization. You put every high school at its maximum usage, which then starts to challenge high school principals on how you get schedules put together and how you get AP courses scheduled with exploratory courses, with band, with language arts, with all that stuff. So as you creep up to that 100%, it offers challenges for the high schools. Not that can't be overcome. But those are the numbers in front of you. Now, I'm also going to ask you that, if you don't like an option, write down that you don't like the option. That's okay, because you're not going to like some of these options. But if you like an option, tell us why you like it. Now, if then we look at the next page, which is the next option of grade configuration, which would be option B that we present, then puts the grade configuration in pre-K4, moving to 5th grade into the middle school, and then 9 through 12, but puts it in a junior high model. So this is what happens. The background behind the 85%, let me tell you that really quick. We all went to high school and we had 7 periods, right? Teachers taught 6 periods, so they had a planning period. 6 divided by 7 is about 85%. That make sense? And so that's how we get a utilization factor. In this case, in the junior high, what would happen is that 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders would rotate through classes. So 5th graders would see an English teacher, a math teacher, a social studies teacher, a science teacher, and then it would rotate just like they do in high school. And so an elementary student at that level then would be running basically on a high school schedule. But that's the way you get the efficiency of it. So you can see as the percentages go that the numbers work, but it's an educational delivery model and philosophy that changes. And so if you have that option in front of you and you favor that option because of utilization, then you're making a change in your delivery for middle grades education and for 5th grade. A couple more challenges, so it's up there. The benefit is this gets you your utilization where you need it. Challenges: teacher certification. Hard to get 8th grade teachers to teach 5th grade because they're not certified to do it. And so how do I get a 5th grader to rotate through a science room that doesn't have a certified teacher to teach that? Certifications don't work that way in Virginia, so we're challenged with that. Okay, so we don't get quite the 85% efficiency because we're going to staff a little different. And that's just the reality of it. Certification is different. And so, just so you're aware, and then you can read those other challenges and benefits of it. So that's your first 2 options, based around grade configuration, based around getting 5th graders to middle schools and even 8th graders to high schools to allow you to see what the numbers do and the benefits and challenges of those 2 options.
And in this particular option, we will have to do something with respect to providing more formal classroom space in the central areas instead of having the flexible space. So, in order to get this number of students in that building, there will be some facilities costs associated with this option.
Because keep in mind, when you had 5th grade in there before, students were in the centrums. We had students in spaces that we saw that one was called the ladder room. It was used for special education because that's where they had to go. There wasn't any other room. And so even though we show that utilization, that's utilizing about every nook and cranny that you have in those buildings. So those centrums disappear and you have to put some temporary stuff in there to do that. Again, that's not a no-cost solution. There's some cost associated with the reconfiguration. And then, of course, moving materials. So you got to get everything moved over to fifth grade.
Okay, so before we move on to talking about some of these options, just so you understand, we're not promoting these ideas as things that we recommend. Almost all these options are not great ideas, but we're in a position here where we're having to choose between a lot of not good ideas and how do we solve that? So, one of the things that we don't think is a good idea, but we want to present it to you because it's a way to reduce capacity. Or reduce utilization, increase capacity. And it's not a requirement to teach full-day kindergarten. It's a great thing to do. It's great for the students, and it improves an early head start. But it does give you, if you go to half-day kindergarten, and this is the bottom chart I'm talking about, I'm skipping around. The bottom chart, oops. It's not going to go that. Okay, so the bottom chart, I'm talking about this one. I think Sandy Hook has 9 or 10 Ks, 8. Okay. Robinson maybe has 9 or 10. Yeah, okay. So what we're proposing here is to take essentially 4 classrooms back by going kindergarten half day in each of the schools. 3 back in Ashburn. So if you stagger your kindergarten, half in the morning, half in the afternoon, we can bring 4 of those classrooms back to serve 1st through 5th grade. And it reduces the elementary school capacities down to 98% for Sandy Hook, 94% for Robinson, which is good. But there's an impact on learning. There's an impact on instruction. There could be some loss of state or federal funding. This community offers full-day kindergarten for a reason. You feel as a community you need it. So that's a tough choice to do this. The middle section of this chart, not a lot of benefit here. Working with the steering committee, what we talked about is that even if we reduce our pre-K offering, we still want to offer it to the special ed students. So we'd only be reducing maybe 1 classroom per school. So not much benefit in picking up 22 students extra capacity there. So we're not even really promoting that center option much. But this is a way to add 88 plus or minus student capacity to Sandy Hook, Robinson, and 66 student capacity to Ashburn.
And Mike, before you move on, just one other thing. Full-day kindergarten, especially when you see pre-P and pre-reduced lunch rates start to go up. Half-day kindergartens don't offer lunch. You take them home, there's 2 transportation schedules, so you have to run the buses twice for that. And so parents kind of rely, and not that we promote that schools are daycares, because they're not, but they provide social services, food for children, safe environments for full day. And again, Mike and I are going to tell you that we're not leaning you either way. We're going to tell you the challenges of when you creep up in high free reduced lunch areas, that there's a cost to that, and it's a social cost to that. And so the neighborhoods have to then figure out how we do that. And you can, you're a community, you come together. But then you're going to have 2 transportation routes in there. So you bring them in the morning, you pick them up at lunch, you do 1 more route back. And so that's kind of the other challenge that you'll see. And again, people around the state of Virginia do it every day. So it's possible to do these half-day programs.
One of the interesting ideas that came up in one of our earlier steering committee meetings was, is there a way in this community to supplement that and provide additional kindergarten, pre-K in other buildings besides the schools, like the local churches? Maybe there's some empty retail space in the community. Is there a way to supplement that so that you can have your full-day kindergarten provide that offering, but still increase capacity in the school. So that's something you might want to be thinking about. All right, so the next option, just very simply increasing the class size. What does that do for us? If we increase K-3 class size to 23 students, and that's an average, 23 student average per class, we get Sandy Hook down to around 100%, we get Robinson down to around 95.5%. But we lose our reduced K-3 incentive program from the state of Virginia. If we go to the standard that Virginia would assign if you were building new schools, which is 24 students average, you actually get down into the high 90s for Sandy Hook, 93% for Robinson. So it's a way to do it, but there are costs involved. Not only for losing an educational opportunity that this community wants to provide, but also the funding that goes with it. Okay. Next one, this was pretty easy. We've done this before. Provide temporary modular classrooms. So if we provided, this is not increasing capacity in the building, this is increasing capacity outside the building. If we added 4 temporary modulars at Sandy Hook, and if we added 4 at Robinson, it's almost the same effect as reducing the kindergarten offer, 98%, 94%. The downside of this one, or one of the downsides of this one, is it's fairly expensive. You're going to either lease these things, you've got to set them up, you've got to bring power to them, you've got to bring data to them. So there is a cost for as long as you do this. The other possible negative consequences is sometimes temporary doesn't become so temporary when you're talking about modular classrooms.
But let me tell you a couple of the positive impacts of this. You can call modular companies and they'll deliver these things tomorrow. They're hungry. They'll come here tomorrow. You've got an immediate solution, not for 16, but for the 15, 16 years. And so there's an immediacy there. Now, also, portables by the square foot, even though expensive, the total dollar amount, we tend to look at the total dollar amount. By the square foot, modulars, even leasing, is a less expensive kind of facility. When you do that. But again, it's total dollar that you guys are interested in. And so we just have to balance that. But the positives of modulars is they work across the country. And they're immediate. And I will tell you that I talk to a lot of teachers who don't mind controlling their own air conditioning, having their own bathroom, and having a little personal space out in their modulars too. So there's always benefits and challenges to it, but we want to tell you the positives of it too, because that is as immediate a solution as you could possibly have in all of these scenarios.
And one other challenge I failed to mention is that this option in particular stresses support spaces in the schools that are already very overstressed, like cafeteria space, like gym space. These spaces are already overutilized, over capacity. Adding more students to these campuses will put additional stress on them. And that means less time to eat lunch, or lunch stretches out to a longer portion of the day. Kids get less gym time. All of this has consequences. All right. The next option we're going to talk about is a transition to a year-round school schedule. In a year-round school schedule, you're still delivering the same number of teaching days, but what you're doing is instead of having 9 months of school and 3 months of vacation, you're running 4 tracks, and you're having school all year long, with breaks in between your 4 tracks. And I've got a diagram to show you, which will explain that a little bit more. But you can see from this chart, it has a pretty dramatic effect on the capacity. It actually increases the capacity of your current buildings by 25%. And there's a corresponding decrease in utilization. So your elementary schools get down to the low 80s, and your middle schools get down to the low 70s. Some of the advantages of this, it's a quick capacity increase, although it probably could not be implemented by 2016. This type of schedule change would take a lot of planning, so it probably would push your horizon out for the short term another year. But the interesting thing about year-round schooling is it provides more opportunities over the year for students to catch up. It's more flexible. You have less of that knowledge drop over the summer where the kids come back and you've got to teach them what you taught them in the last year. So better retention of knowledge because you're having shorter breaks. There's more time for remediation. More time for English as a second language. This option is the only option that reduces the stress on your core and support facilities. Because you're going to have less kids in the school, 25% to 30% less kids in the school at any given time. So less kids needing to go to eat lunch, less kids going to the gym. This is an example of a full track year-round calendar. What it does is it still saves the large holidays. This orange color here, that's actually the Christmas break. There's a summer break in here. It captures the other, that's Thanksgiving here, so it captures the other major holidays. But if you follow this along, what you see is you've got, let's talk about track, the red track 1. 45 days of instruction, 3 weeks of off. This is the blue track. They're getting their off week or off 3 weeks at a different time. This is the yellow track, and it looks yellow, but it's actually green in the newspaper. What you're doing is you're staggering the shifts in the schools so at any given time, you've only got 75% of your students in the school. Now, we can put a week break in here in September for the fair. That's important. But there's a lot of flexibility in how you put it together. But a lot of schools and administrators are going to this not because they like the schedule, but they like the opportunities that it provides for more flexibility, the mediation catch-up piece.
Yeah, and I think that as you explore year-round, and I see students over there going, ain't no way we're going year-round school. But I got a parent that says, yes, ma'am, we are. But here's the thing. As you settle down and you start to look at it, and even Mike and I have to go back and really look, and what we find is that educationally, year-round schedules are beneficial for students. They are all those things that work. The challenges in year-round come in operational. So how do we staff teachers? How do we get transportation to go year-round instead of, so how do we stagger our buses so we get maintenance? It puts stress on the maintenance crews at school because they don't have that long shutdown time to wax floors, to go out and do all the things that they need to do. Now, however, educationally, this is a sound program. Now, you wonder why we say just elementary and middle school. Well, because you keep those big tracks of holidays, Memorial Day, Labor Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, the same holidays happen for high school as they do for the elementary and middle school. But at high school, we see kids that go out and get jobs, so it kind of impedes on those kind of opportunities for students. High school kids can drive, and so you can stay on a traditional schedule at the high school and still not break up families, which is important. That we make sure that families who have middle schoolers and high schoolers, some of you who have high schoolers and, oh, here comes that elementary kid, some of you have that going on, So you really wouldn't interfere with those major holidays that you typically take together anyway on those. And so there's a huge benefit educationally to make this work. The reason Mike said that we don't think we could do this in a year is because all of those things have to happen. Be scheduled, get the teacher contracts in place, get the bus operation in place, get the food staff in place, get all those things working together. Oh, and then come communicate to you guys effectively over time so nobody's confused as to when the year round starts. So it is a tough thing to implement, but once you're in it, we find like divisions that go to it, find it to be hugely beneficial to them. And so, again, we think this is a strong option, but we think it's a challenging one. And again, what Mike said, it pulls kids off campus, which is the most effective way to get utilization where you need it. Okay, and I get boundaries, because boundaries are fun. Okay, now what we're showing you, and let's make this very clear, what we're showing you is an example of a boundary scenario that we could use. So all of you that have looked at that map and say, hey, I live in there, this is just an example because we want to show you impacts of how we do boundaries. Now, obviously, what we told you is that we geocode every student in the division. So we know where every kid lives. We know where you live. And we count those students to see, now one dot on there may represent one kid, but sometimes they represent 9 or 10 because it may be like an apartment complex with mailboxes in the same place. That make sense? And so, but we're able to select and summarize, so we're able to see how many kids. Now on the surface, once again, moving boundaries seems like a simple solution. So if I move the boundary, then I can alleviate overcrowding because I'm pulling kids out. But here's the thing, is that when you move the boundary, every child that you select in there may not necessarily help your cause. And keep in mind, we're only dealing with 100 seats for all elementary schools put together. And let me tell you, for that 100 seats, this is the effort you go through. So if you look at that bottom area right there, now obviously you can see we choose those border lines because that's the easiest ones to shift back and forth. So you on the way outskirts, nothing to worry about, right? Not me, I don't have to worry about it. That bottom grid right there that you see, in that grid we have 92 K-5 students. So there's 92 K-5 students that live in there. So you think, oh, there's my move. I can move 92 out of the central area, put them south, and then I then shift that a little less population from the top and move them down. Here's the problem, of those 92, 35 of them already go south. So we selected 90, the impact's actually 60. And so we spread the net bigger. So those 92 reflect about 75 families that we would impact in this move. Now, once again, I'm going to ask you, that's your kid, that's your house. Because boundaries are easy, and we hear this all the time at the beginning of processes. Move boundaries, it'll work. And that's a great boundary move, as long as it doesn't happen to me. And that's a pretty common thing we hear out there. I get it. Hey, I live in a district myself. But when you start to do that, you spread the net further. If we want the net effect of the 90 kids, we're going to have to spread that net bigger, which then means you're impacting 125 families. Maybe a little more to make sure you get the net effect in there. So you have to come to conclusions as a community, because Mike and I will tell you the two hardest things to do when we work with school districts is to close and consolidate buildings and to move boundaries. Those two draw blood, and they're hard to do. So you have to decide as a community, is that movement and that shift of 100 seats, because that's what it is, you see the chart on the next page, basically gets you to 100% utilization at all 3 elementary schools. Is that worth the effort of the boundary change? And then, at the end of the day, can you rotate out of play? So, the capacity issue's done. Can you rotate out of that play? If I change the boundary in 3 years, am I going back and telling that family, guess what, you gotta go back? So, and then, one other impact. And I have to tell you this. Of those 60 that are left, About 15 of those are going to have high school brothers and sisters. And I'm going to ask you to drive your child to elementary school and have one go to the other high school on different campuses. Now, would we ask people to do that? Probably not. We want to keep siblings together as much as we can, families going to the same campuses. As you saw tonight, you should walk the whole thing and get your open houses done in one night. That is the Walmart version of how we can shop our schools. And so that's a great thing when you have that community effort, but keeping siblings together is important. So again, that 90 all of a sudden turns into about 55 or maybe a 50-person impact. So it's not as simple on the surface as we see. And again, you can still do it. You just spread the net a little bigger, is what you do. Now, with this, and we want to make very clear so we don't go home and people are going home and looking at that map with a magnifying glass and saying, that's my house. We would actually try to explore what the best alternatives for the boundaries are, and then work with that community to try to get that boundary to work. So we just wanted to give you an example tonight of a couple of situations. Because the other thing is, you're a pretty big county, and you all don't live right on top of each other, like we do in Virginia Beach and Columbus, Ohio. But you choose that lifestyle. So it's hard to get collective groups of students in a smaller area. So we have to spread it a little further geographically. And that's, again, very common in county school systems, so we do that. But you can see that it balances that utilization across the elementary school schools. Okay, so we wanted to give you the full picture on the boundary to tell you that, yeah, on the surface it looks really good. And again, you can still do boundary changes. And it'll work because we do it all the time.
And the balance is the important word there, because it does do a better job of balancing. It doesn't solve the overcrowding problem. It just spreads it around all three elementary schools. And we've heard and we understand there are concerns about the schools in the southern part of the county being underutilized. So, part of our recommendation very well include a boundary shift to look at better equity between the schools. But it's not going to solve the overcrowding problem.
Right, and that's a benefit. That getting that bigger enrollment will get us more competitive athletic teams, get us those bands, arts, and all those things, and enhance that. So we get that too. All right. So to summarize, and again, we took you through a lot. We thank you for waiting, because I know we're on the hot seat, but I'm more than standing up here. Change grade configurations, reduce pre-K or kindergarten offerings, increase class sizes, teacher-pupil ratios, provide temporary modular classrooms, change elementary to the year and middle schools to year-round calendars, and change attendance boundaries. Those are what you're going to look at. Now, the next steps of this. Ready for that? Now, this is where we kind of get to work. In front of you, you have a lot of pieces of paper. First of all, you should have a registration form on there. We ask that if you just want to register that you were here, please do. If you don't worry about it. Then, on this individual questionnaire, you're going to go through each of these questions, and we're going to give you 3 levels of evaluating these options. And we do this on purpose. The first set of questions is going to ask you in the individual questionnaire to rate on a scale from 1 to 10 your rate of satisfaction for each of the options as they stand on their own. On their own. Don't compare A to B, don't compare A to C. Look at it. If you like it, rate it higher. If you don't like it, bottom it. Take it down to the bottom. The next set of questions then is going to ask you, if you had 2 to go with, which 2 would you go with? And if there's 2 that you can't live with, put the 2 that you can't live with. So it gives you your 2 favorite and your 2 least favorite. Now the last exercise, and again, it's a good way for us to evaluate how you see these options, is we're going to ask you to compare each option against each other option. We call it a paired weighting exercise. So what we're going to ask you to do is we're going to ask you to compare A against B, A against C, A against D, so on and so forth. But then what we're going to ask you to do is compare B against C, B against D, B against E. And as you finish them, you're going to see all these combinations. Now, here's the thing that you don't want to do, is if you have a favorite option, and you go, let's say your favorite option is C. And if you just fill in C on the C column, and that's the only one you compare against, it will deem that question invalid in the survey. Because its objective is to see, as a community, where those numbers lie as they compare against each other, as a whole. And it gives you the opportunity to say, look, A is better than B, A is better than C, A is better than... You can go across and you can rate them against each other. And so then we have 3 different views of how you see these options. And eventually how that works together. Now, when you're done with that, now, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you want to kind of briefly answer them as a cursory review of it, do. If you don't think you can, do not answer that individual questionnaire. We're not going to shove it down your throat. You got a lot of data tonight. Go home. Tomorrow it becomes live. We keep it open until Tuesday morning. And you can spend the weekend, all weekend looking at it if you want. And you can go on, you can click, and you can type as much as you want on comments. That gives you a good opportunity to do that. But the next exercise we're going to ask you to do is, after you're done with the individual questionnaires, we're going to ask you to work as a group, and as you're in your smaller groups here, to try to reach consensus on, first of all, the rating of each one, and then 2 favorite and 2 least favorite. And work as a group to try to reach consensus on each of those in a group questionnaire. You have a facilitator at your table, and every table has one. They got a circle on there, on their name tag. They're going to have a purple questionnaire, and they're going to facilitate that discussion with you. Now again, how you come to consensus, like on the average, how you support it, you may say, what's the average across the board, and that's what it is. But it gives you an opportunity to state your point and why you think some are beneficial and some are not beneficial with people of your community. And then record that answer. Now when you're done with that, the group exercise, you can stay here. You may finish it in 10 minutes, you may finish it in an hour, depends on your group. We're going to close out the presentation and not have a closing, so when you're done, you can go. Here's what I want you to do before you leave. Facilitator, when you get your group questionnaire, I want you to go up to the wall right here, and I want you to put a check mark next to the answer that your group gave. At the end of the night, we're going to see how all the groups kind of fared. It's nothing scientific, it just gives you some idea about where the groups were leaning to, until we get good statistical information. Second thing I'm going to ask you to do is take that group questionnaire, the registration form, and the individual questionnaires that got finished, and put them in that manila envelope for us, so we don't lose them, and we'll collect them. We don't want you to clean up, we don't want you to do anything like that. Just put them in there, walk away. If you want to bring it to us, that's fine. If you have questions, raise your hand. I've got facilitators walking around, including Michael, myself. Matt Sachs is our GIS analyst, can answer a lot of demographic questions for you. We're going to come and talk one-to-one with you. Take as much time as you need. I think I speak for Mike and I when we tell you thanks, first of all, for your patience and listening to this tonight. Second of all, thanks for inviting us to your community, because I know this is an easy discussion, and it's especially not easy talking to a couple of strangers. But we're here to help and to give you data and collect that data. At the end of the day, this is what last time stated. That Venn diagram that Mike showed you, education, importance, demographics, conditions, and the community input, all have equal value in making a decision. So this isn't a vote. This isn't a vote. We're not going to tally up and say, that got the vote. We're going to balance that community input with the educational component, with the cost component, with the demographic component, to see what rises to the top. And then October 8th, we're going to give a recommendation. We're going to give a recommendation. All right? So with that, I'm going to let you go, get to work. And again, even if you don't want to fill out the questionnaire individual, cursory do it so you have an idea what to talk about with your group. All right, Mike?
The live questionnaire will be a link posted on the Shenandoah County Public Schools website. And like I said, it'll be available tomorrow morning. So with that, we'll let you at it and have fun.
Okay. So